This is the Michael Brian Show. Hi everyone, welcome back to the show. And today I am joined with Hanna Bauer, who helps leaders restore trust, alignment, and resilience using her framework, HEARTnomics. So we are talking about leadership, but trying to come at it from the human perspective today. So Hanna, thanks so much for taking the time and joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael. It's a true pleasure to be here with you.
Now, I know leadership is quite a difficult topic to discuss, but why is person-centric leadership important? Why is it important to factor in the human behind all of it?
Oh my goodness, that's such an important question. And honestly, it is the beginning of a lot, right? So, why is leadership important? One of the first things that pops to my mind is what my mentor, John Maxwell, says, and it's that everything rises and falls in leadership. So, if we're to look at that, everything, that means really everything. And the most important part is being that relationship. We can say we're leaders, but if there's nobody following, then there's really not that leadership aspect, right? And a big part of leadership is not a position where a lot of times it's where it gets confused, if because either I have a title or this is somebody gave me this position, and that's really missing the whole part. Because again, if we do look at everything rises and falls in leadership, we're talking about the entire part of what community is, of what really we're talking civilization, we're talking about families, we're talking really about those values that drive not only our daily activities, but are the values on how we interact with other people. So why is the human important? Because values is really what ties us. It's the way that we do things. In an organization, it's easy to talk about, sometimes these are our values and put it on the wall. But how are we living up to those? How are we measuring those? And in the same way, as a person and me as a leader, what are my values? What am I known for? And in order for me to do that, in order for me to lead, it's going to require people. There's no such thing as a leader in an island. So the being part of not only a community, of being with other humans, is one of the most important things. But here's the other part. One thing that really your audience needs to know is humans are complex beings. We need leadership because there's complexity all around. And really, is that leadership the one that brings that clarity and is able to help us really accomplish not only the desires that we have, but really surpass the adversities that we see so that we can become better together.
That's a very interesting point, and it made me think actually of what kind of person accepts the responsibility or is able to be clear enough so that other people are prepared to follow them.
Oh my goodness, that's the one that's asking for pain, right? Not really. I mean, in all honesty, people say like, if you're getting kicked in the rears because you're in the front, and and that's honestly that's true. I mean, like, you see that in a team, right? We in a team, the if something doesn't go well, if it's there's opportunities for growth, the one that takes the responsibility is the leader. And if things are, I mean, like, if I'm sorry, if things go well, the one that doesn't take the responsibility is the leader. So when you give the team, hey, they shine. But if things don't go well, the leader is the first one to raise their hand. Hey, how can we do this better? So it is difficult in the sense that you have to have the right mindset. Because one of the having worked with really at this point thousands of leaders worldwide, I think a lot of times where we fall short, where we as leaders are not serving not only the calling that we have in the work, in personally in what we in our purpose, but also to the people that we serve, is that we confuse accountability with blame. We confuse responsibility with authority. And we're not operating in both taking the full ownership of what we do. And ownership comes with, yes, there's good moments, there's bad moments. And really, it is a servant mind. So yes, when things don't go well, you are taking the responsibility, but you're also taking the authority. And when things go well as well, you're shining the light on your team. So it takes a person that is willing to not be the spotlight, but wants to set the stage and the spotlight on others. That is one of the parts. The other part is they really want to solve a problem. And you realize when you're solving a problem, when first of all, if it's a problem you have a passion. There's something about it that you just won't let it go in the good sense, right? I mean, you keep on looking, you're looking at different ways to solve it. So I believe that, again, the true leader is not looking at command and conquer. We don't need leaders for that, but we need leaders that are solving problems so that the rest of the team can go forward, right? And bringing really what failure gives us, which is those learning points. So a leader that is willing to take on failure, because it's going to be a part, it's a part of every leader story. It's a part of what we do. That's how we learn. That's really the story of humanity is failures. So it's going to take that person too that is willing to be courageous and be strong through failure, in the light of the teams and what they're doing.
I'd be curious about how they, I could suppose, look after themselves because if they're dealing with the responsibilities, and in some case, they're responsible for the mistakes as well as the good
Yes.
things, or maybe it's like, the good is the team, but the bad is on them, sort of thing. So they never truly get what they put in, so to speak.
Yeah.
How do they go about it? How do they communicate? How do they look after themselves so that they can
Yeah.
handle that?
Oh, that's such a good key question. And this is why we are seeing that burnout, right? I mean, we are seeing high rates of burnout. We're seeing because we conceptually we understand it. Conceptually, hey, it makes sense. This is what, is I'm sure I'm not the first person who says this. It's been told we know, hey, I'm gonna take full responsibility in that. So how do you continue to do that? And may perhaps in a place where there's not even really appreciation or even understanding. I know I have 5 children. And let me tell you, when I have to do things or things don't go well with my 5-year-old, really there's not much understanding. And even with my 21-year-old, and sometimes even with my spouse, like the completely understanding where I'm coming from or what I stopped from happening. It's like, don't you understand? This is what didn't happen. And it's very difficult to explain. So one of the main things I realized as a leader, in both in my family life and also professionally, is I had to keep my cup full. It was those moments when I was operating at really taking into my reserves, which at times we have to do. Times of crisis, times of change, we do dig into that reserve, right? We also dig into the reserve of others. We're taking what reserve, the goodwill reserve, right? The rapport that we built, the basically the cup that we've been filling, that deposit account that we've done, hey, where the trust has been built and we're taking a withdrawal. So as a leader, the same thing. When things go not well, when we are giving and giving, and yes, it's a lot of times where you're giving credit and you're taking all the things that went wrong. It is most important that you keep your cup full, not just cup full, but again, what do you want in a bank account? You want an overflow. And it's the same thing with a leader. You want that overflow. How does that happen? Well, you got to know what you like. You got to know what you want. And that is another part I found. And even I found that parts of myself where I am serving, I am going forward, I am, doing my thing, going places, and yet at the same time feeling lonely, feeling exhausted, feeling really like I don't even know what is it that I like or want, because being a mom, having to tend to those to the needs. Of course, I'm going to put their needs first. So understanding as a leader, what I had to do is I had to take a break because I was not performing at my best. I was not giving the result, not getting the results I wanted, but I also wasn't enjoying life. And if I wasn't enjoying life, guess who else wasn't enjoying life? My family, my teams, because we the way that we do one thing is the way that we do everything. So in that sense, keeping your cup full, understanding first of all your purpose, um and that does take time to get away. You got to take a breath, you got to take a pause. It's great accelerating. It takes a lot of energy to accelerate. It also takes just as much energy and just as much tactfulness to decelerate, to pause. It takes courage to pause, to let go of the noise and to really get down again and connect with yourself, because you cannot give what you don't have. If you want a purposeful workforce, you have to be yourself in purpose. If you want an engaged workforce, you have to be engaged. If you want a passionate, you want people that are do it people and are getting out there, you yourself have to do that, because again, you cannot give what you don't have. And a leader doesn't just know the way, but they guide the way, but they show the way. We are role models of what we want to see in our teams.
Role models is definitely a concept that's been around for a while, but so few actually discuss it in a practical way. So we talk
Mhm.
about role models, but then it kind of stops there. But what usually happens is when you're practicing what you preach, you're doing the things that you're expecting others to do. So
Hmm.
depending
Yeah.
on that situation there, Hannah, what does it take to be a role model? Because if you're expecting people to do things in a unique way, maybe it's an unusual way, maybe it's an effective way, and yet
Yeah.
to lead in some ways, you're having to display that as well. How do you balance that? Because surely you'd be empowering them to do things themselves at the same time.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. So here's one of the things. First of all, you may not think yourself as a role model, but let me tell you, someone's always watching. Someone's always watching what you're doing. So you don't have to have, first of all, the position or like, hey, once I get out there, once people know me, or I'm an influencer, or people only are seeing what I'm putting even on social media, which they might, but understanding what is a role model. And in order for us to really understand what a role model is, it helps, if not it being everything, is to know who are my role models. In order for me to be a role model, I need to have a role model. So who are my role models? Who am I modeling? And we're not talking about idolizing a certain person or a character, but maybe we have a role model in fitness. Maybe have a role model in nutrition. Maybe have a role model in parenting, a role model in marriage. And we have different role models because again, we don't do what we hear, right? We do what we see. So the first part in understanding that yes, a part of leadership is being a role model. I mean, you're gonna be a role model. People are seeing it, but they don't just see you when you're ready. Hey, okay, everyone, I'm ready for you to see me now because I'm now in this position. No, realize that people have been watching you and they're probably watching you for a long time. I see that, especially now for me, people I've known for years that reach out and they've been following the journey and they become curious. I've seen this change. I've seen this part. So in role model is not the transformation even that you may able to express. It's a transformation that people see, because when we're talking about transformation, that's what leaders do, right? Leaders are catalysts for transformation. Leaders are the ones that are bringing, again, solutions or bringing clarity at a moment where it's chaotic, where there's conflict. If there's conflict, that's the leader's sign for go. This is your time. So right now is the time of the leader in times of conflict, in times of when it's a down, where people feel a bit down. Those are the times that are saying, hey, this is the time for the leader. And what are you doing? People aren't necessarily hearing what you're saying. They're seeing what you're doing, right? So it's important to, first of all, who are your role models? Where do you have role models in? If it's an area that you want to grow in, it starts with what role model do you have for that area? There has to be a point of reference. The other part is if somebody was to talk about you, right? What do you want to be a role model in? Going back to what do you want to be known for? What is that purpose that you have? And understanding that it's not just the stories that you say that are going to give people role models, they're seeing everything. So be integrous, live the life that you are claiming to live. Leadership is not a thing we do. Leadership is a way that we express ourselves. And yes, it's about keeping the cup full. And it's about being courageous. It's about stepping in those places, especially in times of conflict. And being that role model, but also having role models, which means that support the people that are really speaking to your life. Be an encourager with that part, with being in contact even with those people that really are those role models for you, you even get greater ideas. It's one of the practices that I do. I mean, I get around not only inner circles with groups, I do think tanks, and they're for different things. Sometimes it's for business, sometimes it's for personal growth, sometimes it's for nutrition, for fitness, sometimes it's for parenting. So understanding that you don't have to have just one role model, and you may be serving as a role model in areas that you don't even realize, but you are serving as one. People are watching.
Do you find then that that's a good thing? Do you think having that responsibility or pressure to live the way that you want, to do the things that you want, to make sure that you are your best self, do you think that's
Mhm.
net positive?
So yeah, so here's the deal, right? I mean, what's changed? I mean, basically our do has to match our what we say, right? I mean, so that the question comes in is like it's not like it was 10 years ago. It's not like it was 20 or 30 years ago. It seems like a lot more people are watching and not even people in my neighborhood. It goes, I think even when we talk about teenagers, right? I mean, you may have made a mistake or something funny or a blunder now it where it may have stayed in the inner group and it was a joke, now it's something that may remain forever in the digital world. Like suddenly everybody's seeing your mistakes, everybody's seeing your wins. And yes, I believe what you're talking about, the amplification of just life has gone even beyond what we would say, not that it was ever in our control, but maybe it was more geographically limited, and not only geographically, but proximity limited. Also, the proximity, as in the people that were actually in the room, like, oh, I'm so glad nobody saw that, those kind of things. But now that's not the case. So, in a world where, yeah, everybody could be watching, people, a lot of people you don't know are watching, and it does definitely give that increase in pressure and anxiety. I mean, we see that. And the reality is that when we do things and when we say things, people interpret it different ways. The way that that's why we study communication. That's why I train, I coach people in speaking and listening and that, because when we're talking about communication, not everybody hears the same thing. When we talk about observation, not everybody sees it the same way. So I believe a lot of times what the pressure comes in is that not necessarily like, hey, I was just living out my life and it was fun, it was happy, this is just me. But the way that the fear that comes in is the way that that may be interpreted by other people. So the pressure comes in is that if there is a disconnect between how the reason why I did what I did or I said what I said and the way that it was taken. And it is that gap, that disconnect gap, that a lot of times is where we get caught up in the pressure. So how do you overcome even that gap? And that is a fair question for everybody to ask, because if you are going to be out there and putting things in social media and being what you call as an influencer, people are you're going to bring more attention. You're going to bring people are going to be able to know more, and of course, if people know more, there's more opinions. They're complex opinions. So as a leader, understanding what is the feedback, just like in an organization, what is feedback that matters to you? You're not going to be able to please people. So you cannot also go into what you're saying into pleasing. And really, the most of all, what people do admire, and then really what we admire about ourselves and where we start gaining alignment is in understanding, having that integrity of knowing who we are. Only we know our intent. We tend to judge people by their actions, but we judge ourselves by our intentions. So also understanding that everybody's doing it. They might judge the action, they don't really know the intention, and people may never know. And that is something that you're gonna have to say, hey, am I okay with that? Am I not okay with that? But the pressure really doesn't come out of like, can I really be me? Be you. Be you. You only have one life. Be you. Now, the gap between like how you live and how people respond, that's on them. But if you are looking at how do I manage or cope that, then maybe give some more clarity, give some more framework on the things. But definitely there's going to be misunderstanding no matter what. And the pressure really comes out not of integrity. Okay, can I really be myself? It really comes out of what are people going to think if I am myself? And that is something that's your life is yours. And we need to be courageous and be integrous and do good.
It sounds like we need a little bit of help on trying to not lose ourselves when we are trying to be a leader or be ourselves or try to be the clearest person in the room in some ways, because you see it a lot, especially when you've got average people, let's say, and they are given whether it's earned or otherwise, they're given a following. So they're given people that follow them for whatever it is that they're doing, and
Mm-hmm.
yet they haven't necessarily built themselves into a space where they
Mm-hmm.
can handle it.
Yes.
They always hit this breaking point because it seems like they need to start working on themselves to be able to handle the pressure and the responsibility that you
Mm.
spoke about before.
Oh my goodness. So I think that's a trap, right? Because thinking that in order for me to serve others, I must lose myself. And I have heard that before. I think even that was a more traditional way, kind of like you lose yourself in service. And that doesn't really help somebody. Like being lost. I mean, who wants to be led by somebody who's lost? Even in a good thing, being this, being even said that being losing yourself in service or losing yourself into whatever it is that you're pouring yourself into. Um, there is what you have mentioned right now. You're talking also about time. Some people, yes, we hear that they're placed in a position and suddenly is what it seems like a lot of influence, a lot of responsibility, and yet there hasn't been that time. Now, I don't. I think especially in our society, we like that whole drive-through breakthrough. Essentially, we want the breakthrough. Like, yeah, yeah, just give me the bullet points. Let me just have it done, and that's really what society does. So. Just as much as we want to have the breakthroughs, we want to have that immediate influence. And sometimes, like you said, people seems like people are thrown into it. And like, okay, now you go do your thing. A couple of things. One is cannot remove the value that time brings. So yes, doesn't mean that the most experienced is going to do the best, not at all. But the one that does take the time to review that experience is going to be able to be the best ahead because we're learning, right? Um, there is a beauty, there is an art, and also in failure and being able to rise again from that failure, meaning the processes, the lessons that we learn. And for those, many times it takes time. Nobody wants to fail. I mean, like it's not fun. It's not like, oh yeah, I can't wait to fail. It's not. I mean, you get into a good relationship with it, a healthy relationship, but it hurts. Many times relationships are hurt. Things are, hurting people hurt people. And a lot of things really, they take time to heal. Time does a great thing. I mean, look at what happens in nature. You plant a seed doesn't just grow immediately because you put it in the ground. A seed needs to be nurtured, it needs to be watered, and there's time. Even with the right nurture and the right water and the right sunlight, you're not going to make it grow any faster. So there is that, again, understanding that in my leadership there's some things that are going to require time. I'm learning the entire place. I'm committed to grow. I'm committed to serve. I'm committed to be in the soil, in the right place with my people and all that part. But I also understand that there's some things that are going to require time, that they're a process. I came to that realization in my leadership, but also in understanding what true leadership that worked was. And that's where my heart framework came out. I realized that the best leaders and the ones that were sustainable, the ones that really sustain those pressures that we're talking about, that sustain that responsibility, weren't just leaders that just, hey, they were just inspired and momentum and we're going to seize the day. But they were the leaders that, along with the energy that they brought, they really what sustained them were the values that they led with, that they interacted with other people. And that's where my heart framework came in. I realized that for me, I had experience. There was a lot of things in my story where I couldn't participate. I was in a hospital bed and for years as a kid, my formative years. So I wasn't able to experience a lot on my own, but I was able to observe a lot. And in that observation, even with the people that had the not only the impact, but the way that I saw having impact in a hospital where really they're dealing with a lot of life and death all the time, um, I saw that the values were the ones that really not only ignited them to make a change, but also helped them to be able to help people at their weakest times, which is what a lot of times happen in the hospital, right? I mean, that's why they're hospitalized. That's why I was hospitalized. I couldn't be outside. So that's where my heart framework came in. And what is the heart framework? Well, that's about hope, growing in hope, not just like, hey, we need hope, but you can actually grow in hope. Empowerment, understanding that you cannot get what you don't have. You want to leaders empower others, so you must know how to empower yourself. The accountability. Yes, accountability as far as the what we're doing together, but accountability really speaks to community. Again, as a leader, you're not an island to your own. If you have no followers, you're not leading. And I'm not talking about social media followers. I'm talking again, like what we mentioned earlier. Who are you a role model to? Who are the people that are working with you? Who are the people in your community, in your inner circle? And their results. What are we doing? A leader is looking at, hey, what are we doing together? How is this us coming together? How is even, how is this conversations? How are we moving the needle? How are we measuring where the needle's at? And then obviously the last one being in my heart framework is trust, because that is the currency for a leader. We go into places that people haven't gone before. We're creating change that we see, hey, this is necessary. And for that, we're going to need trust. So we have to build that trust first here. We have to align the trust here. And then we also must not only give the trust, but have a way to be able to build that trust with others. And that's what I do with my heart framework.
Do you find then that being able to trust yourself is important? Like, and when you
Yeah.
mentioned values earlier, it makes me think, how can you trust someone that you don't know, which would
Oh, yeah.
include yourself?
Oh my goodness. I mean, you have to trust yourself. That goes back to self-efficacy. Yeah, that goes back in with psychology. When you're talking about with bringing people again into be able to operate, the first thing is you're building self-efficacy. Trust sometimes is confused only with confidence, and that's not what we're talking about. Not only portraying or being confident, but trust is knowing like, hey, I know myself enough that I know if I'm in that situation, I'm able to start to forecast. I'm not afraid of the things that may come because I already know I have built enough in me to be able to battle specifically that. So trust definitely comes with practicing. And yes, you can practice and when it comes down to even for emotions. You can practice time like the listening. You can practice in the conflict resolution. But trust is one of the main things. And absolutely, how can you trust somebody you don't know? So that's going to take time to understanding you. And it's a good time spent. You're never going to get away from you. So one person, one human, you will not able to get away from.
Must be quite the challenge though, because if you're on this growth journey, then in some
Hmm.
ways you're constantly evolving, aren't you?
Well, so there's things that evolve, right? But there's some things that don't. I tell you, even from like watching my kids, I mean, there's some things I never taught them, obviously, even my little one. And I can tell you like 20 years later, like, yep. And I'm sure you've heard that. Yeah, that reminds me of the 5-year-old. I remember to see this. I remember the even as a baby, you can see their behavior. And that's something about even personalities and even understanding how you're going to respond or understanding what you need. That's why I love behavioral science as well. I mean, I do a lot of training with organizations with the DISC, for example. And DISC is a communication tool. So what is involved in that is the genetic, right? There's things that we inherit from our parents. So there is a genetic aspect to the way that we're going to respond. I mean, we know that even with trauma, there's trauma that you transfer over to a child. I mean, there's trauma transfer, there's confidence transfer. There's a lot of emotions that are being transferred already. So there is a genetic part to the human behavior. There's also the nurture part, right? Like those things that we are able to that are grown, that are validated, that young in our youth, they're validated as we grow. They're validated where oh yeah, you're really good at that. It's things that people start pointing out, things that come natural, the nurture part. But then there's also those that we are looking at learning, right? The training part. We're looking at like, hey, how do I start how is my perspective because of my experience? Not only that was nurture, right? That was validated, but my actual experience is showing me how I show up in the world and how I want to show up in the world consistently. So when you're looking at those parts, that what becomes that behavior, that trust, when you understand yourself, you know that maybe you're that person that it's not that I don't go with the flow. I just need about a 24-hour, 48-hour warning and I'm good. We're game for anything. Or I may be the one that, hey, you tell me 2 minutes before and I'm game, or actually I may be the person that I need 2 weeks. And it's okay. Understanding what it is that I need. There's no problem at all with understanding what it is you need, because that way you can communicate. And guess what? When you're able to communicate and you're aware of what you need and you're aware of how you respond in different situations, you understand how you respond to stress. And yes, you can know that. That's something that I help a lot of my coaching clients with this. Then you're also going to be very aware and very mindful and cognizant of how somebody else, what is it that they need? Because it becomes reciprocal, right? Okay, if I need this, if I need the time, I wonder how much time does Michael need in order for them to know, like, hey, let's take a road trip. Does he need 2 weeks? Does he need a day? Does he know, like, hey, let me just, he's ready to go with, he carries his bags all the time in the car. I start being aware and I ask those questions. So when you're able to ask, when you become aware not only of the needs, or I'm able to adapt to those needs. And that's how we build on those human relationships. But first, I probably would not be aware or even be mindful of asking you if I'm not asking of that myself. And I believe that's what happens a lot. I mean, again, we cannot give what we don't have. It's not that we are there to because I don't care about you. It's really a lack of self-love. Many times it's a lack of, hey, what is my purpose? How would I respond in stress? How do I respond when I'm not stressed? How about that? What does well feel like for me? Am I sitting in my room reading a book, jamming to my jam, or am I out in the beach with everything loud with a whole bunch of people and all things are well? Understanding those.
That is a very, very good question because so many people look at the opposite, don't they? They think, okay, how am I stressed? How does it feel when I'm anxious? What about this? What about that? Maybe I'm fearful, and what is that like? But let's go the other way. How is it when you are well? How is it when you are happy? How is it when, as you mentioned, your cup is full?
Mm-hmm.
That seems like the first step to me, like trying to work out what that is.
And it is difficult when you are in dysfunction. I can tell you again, I'm going through a heart disease. That was about 10 years of my life. Which years? My formative years. From the age of 4 until about the age of 14, when I received my life-saving surgery, the pioneering surgery. But what happened? I was told, hey, you're well. That there were signs of me being well, but I didn't know what that well felt like. And I actually felt uncomfortable with not having the dysfunctional heartbeats, right? The ones that went super fast, or the ones that were completely arrhythmic, the ones that were completely abnormal, that took my breath away. I was consistently on this part in, watching out for what's going to happen. And waiting for validation from the outside, from a grown up, a doctor, a nurse, which they weren't around anymore because I was well, to tell me, hey, how I was feeling. And it really took me about a couple of years for me to find out what did well feel like, and being well with being well. And that is one of the things that is a grace period for all of us. There's times in our lives where we go through a trauma, we go through chaos. It may be going through right now, but understanding that that is a moment. It is not a person, right? That is a moment in your life. That's not who you are. That's the way that you responded for something. And also getting in touch back with, the real you, who you are, and understanding what is that well. We make the good news is that we're, as humans, we forget very quickly. I mean, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, right? But the other part is that we also can be very intentional in creating those memories. We remember by touch, we remember by emotions, we remember by sounds, by visuals. So when you're talking about keeping your cup full, when you're talking about being a leader that not only is able to trust themselves, but is also able to create those impactful moments, is being mindful in creating those memories. I sometimes, for me, it's even like a light touch over here, just connecting a good moment with something that's comforting. I even taught my kids, one of the things is taking pictures with your mind, because you won't always may have the phone, but you can always take a picture with your eyes. Just taking a moment to take the picture and recalling that picture just in your head to bring you back to those moments because we make memories like that. So we have to be intentional in what does well feel like. And you are definitely in the driver's seat on saying what is well for you and making those memories. You don't have to wait for a phone. You don't have to wait for somebody else to tell you. Not like you have to be like me, valid people validating, hey, you're good. No, understand what is good for you and making a point, being intentional to memorize and not only memorize, but going back to those moments so that you can use them in times when you do have to go through adversity, in times where things may not look so well that you know that they are possible.
How do you suppose this translates into whether it's a company, whether it's a business? How does it
Mhm.
translate to success? Do you have any stories, any
Oh yeah.
examples of how all of this is tied together to something that might be more concrete as revenue or
Oh yeah.
sales or something like that?
Oh, definitely. I mean, first of all, just the memories, what I just mentioned to you, the celebrations. Um, Companies that celebrate those moments, you talk about behaviors that we want to see again, you reward those moments. I remember that we had a very and I didn't know. I mean, like I can looking back at it, at that moment, didn't understand what a toxic culture was. So here I am trying to make this change. And really, I mean, like here, really my intention was to get data so that we can properly respond to the change. We were going through disruption. We were going through our the standards for our product has suddenly been changed. So now it was one of my responsibilities to understand how do we currently respond to standards and what's the time that it took us to be able to respond to the standards so that we can create our new product. So what did that mean? That meant I had to ask questions. Well, when I started asking questions in a time that was already scary because we didn't know what was going to happen, people didn't exactly respond the way that I thought, like, oh, yeah, all hands on deck, let me answer your questions. No, because at a time of disruption, what's happening is people are, job security comes to the front, right? It's like, oh, no, you know what? Why are you asking the questions? Am I doing something wrong? And it had nothing to do with the people at all. It had because it was an external change that the standards changed. And now I need to know how we responded to the standards internally so we can respond to this external change. But the culture wasn't there to support that. What did that mean? It meant that up to that point, the way that we found out questions or went down in a sense, like really got to the nitty gritty part was because the defects or in a sense, we were celebrating the people that found the mistake in a very large project. It was like, oh my goodness, the one that found a mistake saved everything. And we were not giving any credit to all the work that had gone into it. We're not giving credit to every step. So in turn, of course, we needed that, right? I mean, we were teaching grammar. I mean, you can't teach a kid grammar and make a comma mistake. So yeah, suddenly a comma mistake for us was, like a fire if it was going into a published book. But consistently celebrating the person that found the mistake instead of celebrating also the times that we did finish a project and finish a project on time, or we were able to reduce the amount of time it took to create a project, created a culture that was toxic, created a culture that really was more of that blame, that finding, instead of creating a culture of like, hey, this is like putting the right framework to it. How did we change that? Well, it had to become intentional in, first of all, understanding and celebrating those milestones. It wasn't something that came to me like right away. Again, I learned it painfully because when we had to respond to oncoming change, like again, standards being changed on us, and we're having to quickly respond to this new requirement. And so that we can be, as a business, we can create income so that we can keep our people. It, it was like, this is not the time to create a culture change. However, if we didn't have the right culture in place, which meaning that we had to understand what was making our culture toxic, we were not going to be able to get the answers we needed to be able to respond to the external change so that we can be able to adapt our not only our processes, but also deliver the product. So that looked like for us more celebrations, more gatherings, being intentional in encouraging and celebrating people publicly. Did that mean that we took in less defects or we didn't catch the comma? Oh, it's not a big deal this morning. No, absolutely not. The standard didn't change, but we had to raise our celebrations. We had to raise those things that were good. We had to raise the perspective, the overall what we're looking for. We were looking for gold in the sense of the good things, the well-being, what we were doing, and not only celebrating and looking for the ones that found a mistake. Important to find a mistake, obviously, but not only celebrating that, but having to compensate for celebrating others.
How about this idea of trusting yourself? I know that you linked it to confidence, but not fully. How would that impact a business? Maybe someone that's a bit too careful, a bit too cautious, but then
Oh,
obviously you have to balance the risk-taking element as well.
we need them. We need all of them. Because then you have like some people that are like, oh, we're not that careful, and we're like, hey, we just like let's push the red button all the time. So no, the key thing is here understanding that one is that different people lead differently, and there's not like one roadmap. This is the leader. There's different ways that a leader rises, right? I mean, like if you're looking, it depends on what the project is at hand. So what the like you mentioned, like somebody who may be very cautious, very detail oriented, somebody who may not be like hate about taking risks, right? A lot of our people in finance, a lot of people in technology, right? A lot of people like that. I mean, you still have to work with the decision makers. Decision makers really need them in the team because they're the ones that are able to bring the leadership comes in is somebody who is cautious, somebody who is maybe not so embracing risk, but risk adverse. You still have to be understand that you have a role in voicing that because that's why we need teams. That's the beauty of teams. You're going to have people that are going to love risk and like, hey, yeah, but they're also going to be the ones that are going to be new shiny object and they don't finish one project, they're on to the next and then they're on to the next and they're on to the next. And all you end up at the end is have a mess where you might have people like, hey, I'm not even going to look at another project until we're done with this one. And done, it means done. This is what done means, not like, done, done, or done, done, done. There are different layers to done. So knowing that as a leader, you not only have on purpose, and this is intentional, you on purpose, you have to surround yourself by other people that are different than you to compensate for your blind spots. It's important, but also empowering the people that are different than you, especially if you are a leader that is more of an extrovert and you have leaders that are introverts. Really, this is where the challenge comes in and the genius comes in. It's in creating those stages where the people where they're at are able to really, you're empowering them to be able to voice and bring to the table the greatness that they have. So you're going to have people that are going to be more cautious. You're going to have more people that are, hey, just tell me what to do. I'm all for the team. You're going to have people that are like, hey, I just know this person, they want to make everybody feel good and be encouraging. And you need that too. Or you're going to have the person's like, okay, let's make a decision. So at the end of the day, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? What are we doing here? You need them all. Again, as a leader, is understanding what does the task at hand require, what type of leadership, right? Because you're not going to be the right one for everything. But you have to be the right one for the right ones, but also be able to empower people to help you to not only collaborate, but really leverage their strengths. Other leaders in that, recognizing what type of leader you are, understanding your own leadership tone, it's key so you can recognize what other leaders bring to the table as well.
I find that fascinating how you're able to put people that are different from you in positions where they can, as you said, compensate for your blind spots. Because obviously we're not perfect, are we? Leaders,
No,
we're not perfect. We have blind spots. We have things that we miss, and it sounds
yeah.
like a bit of bit of a meal. They've all got ingredients, they've all got things that will
Yeah.
contribute to the meal, and you got to find the right people for the right places.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of teams. I mean, and that's really the beauty of humanities, right? I mean, like the being human, because we're both human, but you're different than I am. And that is the both the beauty and the challenge in it, right? Like how do two completely different people that are in different places, how can we even come together? What brought us together? A shared purpose, a shared vision. We had a time frame. We know what we're doing, what we're looking for. The same thing happens in any team. You are able to bring different people. Hey, this is because you set up the framework, and that's really what a lot of what leadership is. It's just setting up the stage, setting up those safe spaces for these conversations to be had and being purposeful and bringing people with different. And when I talk about differentiated, I'm not talking about, hey, only the representation or backgrounds or that. No, I'm talking about difference in function and the ways that we think. Again, some are more thinking of task oriented. Some are more, hey, the relationship oriented. Some are more like, hey, what is the bottom line? So understanding that I need them. And yes, because we don't look at everything the same, guess what? There's going to be some conflict. But this is not something that's going to take you out of the surprise. It's good. That's how we learn. That's how we are able to create solutions and innovate in products that are going to serve all, not just some, but all.
It sounds like we need to create the environment that allows people to be able to be free, because there are so many
Mhm.
that would potentially fearful of losing their position, losing their job, losing their position as a leader. So fear might play a part as well. So how would you
Oh, yeah.
suppose we can remove that to allow people to make mistakes and to fail and to grow? It sounds like the environment's key.
Oh, 100%. A good environment is not an environment where like, hey, it's free for all, just be yourself, do all this, find your way. No, a good environment has a framework. A good environment has boundaries. A good environment has clarity. I think we like clarity, and that is really like, hey, this is your lane. And then you know how you can make it shine. Then because with that lane, with the framework, you also understand your authority in that. There even been studies, I think this was one study from a long time ago, where they let the children around the moms and play and in a playground with no gates. So what ended up happening, what they observed, the psychologist, was the children were consistently around the mom, right? Consistently around, like just the safety zone that comes around the parents. Then they brought the another group and they had the same thing, the same playground, mom, kids, but this time they had a fence around it. Well, guess what happened to these children where they played? They did no longer play next to the mom. They played as close to the boundary as they saw it. So they extended their range from the same place, still safe, right? It's still a gated place. Mom's still there, playground's still there, but they expanded their own horizons without being told. They went to the border. So this is what happens a lot of times. Sometimes companies or businesses, they're afraid to put in that what we call that gate because we think, oh, we're putting people box in, and we're not. What we see is that without clarity or boundaries, we tend to stay or become very dependent on decision making on one person, or because we don't know, we may not be testing because we're afraid. Okay, what if I go 5 steps? What if I go 6 steps? Is that going to be a problem, or 7 steps? Versus if I have clear boundaries, I really honestly have more free range and I'm able to really express even more again because there's a framework, there is a clear way that we're communicating this, and there's a clear way of delegation. And that in itself removes a lot of the fear. There's still fear, right? I mean, you're still going to have to do things, but you're able to remove so much of that anxiety of why we're not able to take those decisions because really, I don't understand what is my authority here? Where is my boundary here? What is the framework that we're operating in? So the more that you can bring that in to your workplace, that's going to help solve a lot of the fear and really have those meaningful conversations that are going to help you unpack that what may be the uncertainty and unpack what may be not so clear, navigate that complexity.
That's a very interesting little story that you shared there, Hannah, because I can imagine people would try to keep things close or maybe not share as much or maybe not set rules or boundaries because of what they're seeing. So people are hanging around them, people are fearful about
Mm-hmm.
making mistakes and taking action as well. And then just by putting the odd rule in there or the odd boundary, that can change everything.
It really can. Once you give a framework, again, it's called a framework, right? Because it looks like a frame, like a frame here. But I also know where to be at, where not to be at, right? I mean, there's so many decisions I'm already making on my own because I understand my framework. And I don't have to come to you every single time. Is it okay if I'm here? Is it okay if I'm here? No, I mean, like, hey, no, this is your space. And when you're clear in that, you'll see the leaders that rise up to that. You see the people, like so many of the decisions in the day that are coming to you, decisions in the day that may not be made, are well taken care of. But once people understand, okay, this is the framework that I'm working in.
In the spirit of leaving no stone unturned, Hannah, what would you say were the keys to being a great leader? Let's think of things that we haven't talked about before.
Well, one of the things that we touched on, but it's what we've been saying, like, okay, how do I take this inside and how do I work on it on the outside? Does it work? But you've heard me say, you cannot get what you don't have. So what does that take? Really, what I'm talking about there is alignment. You're talking about being having to align yourself internally so you can respond and you can act externally. Externally meaning with your teams, with your organizations, with the people that are part of your of not only your world but the ecosystem that you're looking to influence, right? As in when it comes to leadership. So one of the key things is having that practice, and this is where I have brought together for leaders is the beat frame, the beat method that grows you with heart, in that framework that we're talking about, the values-based framework. And in beat, how I train a lot of my leaders is start again being mindful, starting very quickly, understanding what are the beliefs that are coming right now. Maybe a thought, maybe I'm feeling a bit flat, maybe I'm feeling a bit low in hope, or hey, I really don't know if I can trust myself in this. So immediately catching what that belief is. Why am I questioning that? And the engagement part is, how do I engage with what I currently have? It's not what more do I need to get. It's what do I currently internally have that's going to help me in this situation. And it can be a memory. It can be people that come to my mind. It can be, again, those role models that we talked about. All of that is part of engaging, even with that belief. What is the right belief that's going to help me through this? And then comes the action. What is the smallest action? Because when we talk about empowerment, it's not just this thought, okay, I'm going to feel empowered. No, the self-confidence that we talked about, the self-efficacy, where we talked about even that building of trust, well, it comes with action. Just the smallest little action where I know I'm moving the needle, like it's just one. What's going to move the needle one bit so that I can be closer to seeing the result that I want to see, which leads me to transformation in beat. So the transformation is the transformation that I have really in line with the belief that I have. And that is my alignment. So it's believe, engage, act, transform. I talk to people about this because for leaders, it needs to be a practice that we do, that internal alignment, because outside it's going to require all these other parts, right? It's going to require trust. It's going to require delegation. It's going to require accountability. It's going to require being there when during conflict. It's going to require, like we said, taking credit, giving credit when no credit, when you did all the work maybe, or making sure you're taking credit for all the faults that happened or what went wrong. So it's going to require all these things. It's going to require this constant withdrawals on you and on your service and that part. So it's very important that you're keeping that cup full. The way that we keep it is being in alignment and being purposeful in what we do, being aligned with our purpose, being aligned with what we're doing, so that our execution can be excellent.
Well, that is a fantastic way to finish, Hannah. That has been fascinating. I've enjoyed learning all about this. I think being able to navigate these things and make time for others as well as yourself is very, very important. So, Hannah, how can people find out more about you and enter your world if they wanted to?
Oh, well, a couple of ways. LinkedIn, for those of you that use LinkedIn, that's an awesome way. And also just visit my website, heartnomics.com. I actually have a complimentary assessment there for you for alignment, for individual alignment. So we'd love to invite you. I'm sure you can put that in the show notes. A fast way to see how are you aligning in your leadership with heart.
Thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Those that are listening, feel free to subscribe, share the show, tell others, and also leave a review wherever you are listening into your podcasts. And I've enjoyed this. It's been fantastic. I look forward to keeping in touch. Thanks so much.
Same here. Thank you, Michael.